Hey, nonprofit leaders, Dr. April Willis here again with the National Nonprofit Collaborative. I am thrilled to spend part of my afternoon with you guys today on our next monthly webinar. So, what we're going to be talking about today is program evaluation and impact measurement, demonstrating your nonprofit's effectiveness. This is one of the most crucial aspects of running a nonprofit that I feel like is oftentimes overlooked by nonprofit leaders. For example, nonprofit leaders have this really big heart and they oftentimes want to give everything away and solve everybody's problems and really make a difference in this world. And they're so invested in those actions that they forget to quantify the impact they're having. And by doing that, you're actually doing a huge disservice to your organization. So, we're going to talk about today the importance of evaluating impact and how it's going to help you not only continue to grow internally as an organization, but how it also helps you secure external funding and the importance it has as you continue to build a presence for your organization within your community. Now, I know we're all driven for change, and I know that one of the things we're doing in this nonprofit world is trying to make the world a better place. And there's so much involved in that. And I also know that taking just a little bit of your time to watch a webinar like this is taking precious minutes away from the work that you could be doing. So, we are going to approach today's webinar in a completely different model. Rather than seeing a presentation and going over slide after slide, what I've decided to do instead is collect real world questions from nonprofit leaders who are doing the work and who have questions around program evaluation and impact measurement. So I've compiled a series of questions. I have 8 of them. We'll see how far we get through today, if we can get to all 8 or not. But I would consider these maybe frequently asked questions, or at least questions that people are looking to find answers to. And I'm hoping that I will be able to do that for you today. So, kind of fun, but it feels like I'm interviewing myself, but really the questions are coming from you all. And I'm going to be sharing best practices, tips, tricks, and strategies that you can turn around and immediately apply. All right, so let's jump right in. Here's the first question: how do you determine which outcomes are most important to measure in a program evaluation? That's a great question. So essentially, they want to know, what am I supposed to be measuring here? There are a few ways you can approach this question. The first one is the most obvious, that is related to your core mission, the reason you exist. So, for example, if you have an organization that involves fostering puppies, how many dogs went into foster homes this quarter and this year? Or how many families completed applications to become foster parents for puppies? Or how many families were repeat foster homes for puppies? So we're looking for all of the ways that you can show we are having an impact. We placed this many puppies, we approved this many fosters, and this many fosters came back to repeat support our mission. That would be one example of the top 3 things I would look for in that organization. Let's say you're an organization that supports a food bank. You provide food to the community. You want to look at how many pounds of food did you distribute, or bags or boxes, however you measure your food distribution, track it. How many families did you serve? Track it. Here's a little caveat for that one though. We want both the number of boxes that went out or families served, maybe per week, per month, per year, however often you can find that data. But we also want unduplicated number of families served in a day, a week, a month, a quarter. Now, the difference here is because if you are using this data for grant writing, there will almost always be a quantitative data section that says unduplicated, and you do not want to give them incorrect data. So unduplicated means, let's say you have one family and you know they come every Sunday. You're going to see that same family every Sunday. Well, in the unduplicated number, they count one time, because if you can't continue to count the same family in an unduplicated number, that means how many times without repeats did you serve that family? So that would be another example. I want you, when it comes to this question, how do you determine which outcomes are most important to measure in a program evaluation? I gave you like the initial answer is what is closest related to your mission, and just start counting how you are supporting that mission. The other thing I want you to consider are both short-term and long-term outcomes. Focus on what will provide actionable insights and demonstrate significant impact. Now, that's a lot of words. Basically, at the heart of what I'm saying is you should have short-term numbers, quarterly numbers that you are looking for. And then you also want long-term, over the course of the past 1 year, 3 years, 5 years. This is the difference that we made. So track what's going on as it's happening, but then also track historical data. Don't lose sight of the historical data because it can look very impactful in a grant application. If they say, tell us about the impact you have, and you say, over the past 5 years, we were able to provide transitional housing for 4,000 people in this area. That's incredible, even though each year was less than 1,000. But if you have the opportunity to talk about historical data, it can sometimes bode very well in your favor. Now, let's go to the next question. What are some cost-effective tools or methods for conducting impact measurement with limited resources? I love this question because I know so many of the nonprofits we support, especially through the National Nonprofit Collaborative, you have joined us because sometimes the budget's a little tight and we don't have money to invest in scientists and the people who are used to counting this. We don't have time to work with those who could actually do data analysis for us. And so, what can you do internally and still get valid measures of impact? There are several things you can do. So, one, open up a spreadsheet. This can be a Google spreadsheet, it could be Microsoft Excel. Get a spreadsheet going. And in that spreadsheet, set it up so that every time you have an event or a distribution day, whatever it is that your organization does, find a way to track that in the spreadsheet, not only tracking total numbers, but come up with columns that demonstrate demographics as well. So for example, let's say you provide an after-school program. Not only are you going to track how many students enrolled for the semester, but you are also going to track attendance every day in your program, and you're going to take it a step further. We want to track in this spreadsheet the age of the students or the grade level. We're looking for their socioeconomic status. That means, are they free and reduced lunch? We are looking for their race, for their gender. We're looking for all of the things that we could potentially be asked about in a grant. We also want to say we're supporting 100% of students who are at risk based on these factors, or we are supporting communities of color based on these numbers. So you want to be able to always support what you're saying with quantitative data. So my number one advice to you is open up a spreadsheet and track everything. It costs no money to do that. You just need somebody who's responsible for data input. The second tool I would encourage you to get is start a Google form or even SurveyMonkey Basic. You don't have to pay for it, but start collecting data from your participants, from your clients, the people that you serve, because this gives you another set of data that you can use in grants. So rather than just saying we supported X number of families or individuals, you can say, and here's what they are saying their impact measure has been. And they get to tell a story. They get to say where they've been, why they needed your support, and the difference your support has made. You can always give them room to write out comments in a comment box, but you can also give them 3 quick questions to answer. For example, let's say I've got another client, they work with individuals with disabilities and workforce development. You could simply ask them a question. Do you feel more prepared for the workforce as a result of going through our program? Yes or no? Do you feel like this program was a good use of your time? Yes or no? Would you recommend this program to a friend with disabilities looking for workforce development? Yes or no? Those 3 questions, if you can come back and say 95% of our clients found our program to be effective in preparing them for a job, that becomes quantitative data. So not only have we served this number of people, but those people are saying we're making a difference. Those people are then securing jobs or getting raises or getting promotions. So find all of the elements that you can put a number to, but then also give an opportunity for those clients to provide stories that tug on the heartstrings. This was my situation, and this is how they helped me get out of it or reverse that situation. Also, I think it's important to make sure that whenever you are coming up with these methods and looking back at the question, what are the cost-effective tools or method for conducting impact measurement with limited resources? I think it's really important to not get overwhelmed with the idea of I'm not a numbers person, I'm not a data person, I'm just here to XYZ. Don't get overwhelmed by it. Instead, start small. Start with something that you can wrap your head around and know that over time, you can continue to build that out. But some data is better than no data. So if it feels like too much to start asking all of the questions and collecting all of the demographics, start small with basic numbers. How many people are we serving? If you can start there, then you can give yourself the opportunity to build up. But at no point should you just not collect any data. It will be very difficult for you to get a grant if you have no source of evidence of the impact you're making in the community. All right, the next question, how can we ensure that our program evaluation is unbiased and accurately reflects the true responses and the impact of our work? Absolutely wonderful question. Thank you for asking that. To minimize bias, we want this combination of quantitative and qualitative data that provides a complete picture. So that's what we were just talking about. There's this word called triangulation. If you haven't heard of triangulation, that basically means we're fact checking each other. We're saying, well, I found this data based on the numbers we're collecting, but then when I looked at the survey, it looks different. And then when I asked a person verbally, how do you feel about this? It's not quite checking out. That will raise some red flags to you internally. It's not necessarily stuff that you should feel like, oh my gosh, this is going to ruin our chances at getting a grant. No, what this is going to help you do instead is identify areas internally that your team should start creating goals around. So if you feel like there's a mismatch because of how you are triangulating data and the responses are coming in and they don't seem to be reflective of what you thought was happening, that's okay. Set a goal around it. So for example, if let's go back to that workforce development one. If I'm running a program for individuals with disabilities and we're doing workforce development and I'm getting 15 people in a cohort and I've got a cohort coming in every 8 weeks, I feel like, oh man, this is awesome. We are going through it. We are preparing all these people for the workforce, the workforce, they're going to go out there and get jobs. And I'm like, yep, okay, another 15, another 15. Awesome. I'm at 60 people so far. Then I go back and I look at my client data and I had asked a question, do you feel like this prepared you for the workplace? And 50% said yes. That means 50% said no. Oh, that's not a good look. Well, let's actually see what they're doing now. Did we help people land jobs? Well, if only 25% of them are working, uh-oh, it looks like this is another area that when I've triangulated this data, things are not matching up. I thought we were doing a great job. They thought we were doing an okay job, and then they're actually not getting jobs. That's not what we want to have happen in our program. So what do? This is an opportunity to set internal goals. The internal goals could be, we need to review our curriculum. We need to come up with more touch points throughout the 8-week cohort. We need to do more hands-on training throughout the 8-week cohort. Maybe we need to prepare them for social skills that we weren't preparing them to be successful in the workplace with. Maybe we were too focused on the hard skills that they needed. So you're going to evaluate that as a team and set those internal goals. Now, by doing this, going back to the question, how do we make sure our work is unbiased and accurately reflects the impact of our work? That means we have to, one, be honest with the outcomes. If it doesn't look good, we don't hide it, we don't sweep it under the rug. Instead, what we do is we use that as an opportunity to grow as an organization. Because at the end of the day, we're all doing very difficult work for very little money. What is driving us to do it? Hopefully, it's the impact you're having in your community. If you start to see you're not having that impact, then it would be great for you to be able to come back and say, this is how we think we'll be able to make it better. Also, I want to see lots of team voices. So it shouldn't be one person's call on if something is working or not. And I know oftentimes these startup nonprofits, you have an executive director. This was your baby. You started it, and that's wonderful. But remember, you have a board, and they should be helping you through these decisions. Remember also, you should be giving a voice to the community you serve. As you are looking to revise the delivery of your program, please be sure you're continuously bringing in the people that you serve and that you don't think you know how to serve them best, but you ask them, how could we serve you best? By giving them a voice, you are ensuring that you guys are actually putting your efforts into the parts of your programming that need the most work or that could have the greatest impact because you're hearing from the people who are on the receiving end. Okay, great question. Thank you for that. Let's move on to number 4. Can you provide examples of how qualitative data like personal stories can complement quantitative data in demonstrating program impact? Perfect. When you are writing a grant, it is so important that you are appealing to both people who are number minded and people who are emotionally, I guess, built, the people who want to hear the tug at your heartstrings stories. How has this person's life been changed because of working with you? There are other people that is like, that's one story, that doesn't do it for me. I want to know big picture, how many people or what percentage of people that you've worked with have accomplished what you're trying to get them to accomplish. So we want to see both of those working in conjunction. One of my favorite phrases to put in a grant is whenever you have an opportunity to talk about your impact, you say, we have accomplished the following dot bullet, 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 and you are giving them all the numbers, percents, counts, dollars, averages, increases, decreases, all of the things you've done. I would usually like to see about 4 to 6 bullets that are quantitative facts. Then under that, I like to say, while that quantitative data is very powerful, our story is best told by the community that we serve. For example, here's so-and-so's story. And then you give a little blurb about a brief background, what you all did for a client and the impact that that has had. Do that for 1 or 2 people that you've served or communities or whoever it is that you work with so that they work with each other to complement each other. You say, yes, we collect the quantitative data, but we also have real world stories to share with you. By combining those two, you are creating a more compelling narrative that's going to resonate emotionally and intellectually with your audience. Great question. Let's move on. So the next question, I feel like we've kind of gone over already, so I might breeze through it, but it says, why should we engage in program evaluation? I hope so far you have heard plenty of reasons why you should engage, but let's go over them really quickly. First, grants. It is going to be incredibly difficult for you to earn a grant if you have no proof of impact. Grants want to know what happens when I give you this money. Don't tell me what you think will happen. Prove to me that you know this will happen. What have you done before? You cannot make these numbers up. You cannot guess at these numbers. You need to have hard data. You need to say, in 2023, we did XYZ in Q1, XYZ in Q2, da da da. Over the entire year, we accomplished these things. We served this many people, sent out this many boxes of food. We are able to teach this many students in after school. Whatever it is that you do, give us those numbers. So grants is number 1. Number 2 is because it helps you fulfill your mission even better. Like I had said, we're all doing this because we want to make a difference. If you are spinning your wheels and getting nothing out of it, that's going to feel pretty deflating over time. Rather than letting it get out of hand, catch it early by collecting data and identifying where your gaps are. So by collecting data, you are able to see areas of growth for your organization so you can hopefully nip it in the bud and not go months or years not realizing you have a problem, that you're not creating the impact you thought you were going to. The third reason you want to engage in program evaluation is because it is going to help you celebrate and keep the morale up with your team, with your board, and even with the communities that you serve. When you can share big numbers with people, man, they get so excited about that. And that fires them up and they want to do more. It is a motivator to share celebrations and quick wins, little successes. every time you hit a milestone. Guys, that was just another 100, whatever. We just placed our 1,000th puppy in foster, or we just saved X number of animals in the wildlife from this. Whatever you can celebrate, celebrate often. Let people know what you're doing matters. And not only is that going to motivate yourself and your board and the community that's working with you, it's also going to motivate those donors. And we're not just talking about grants. We're talking about people who give you $5 or $10 here and there. They contribute to your Facebook fundraisers. All of the people who want to support the work that you're doing get so excited when you can say your $10 made a difference. So make sure that not only are you celebrating these things with a Facebook post or in your newsletter, but you also create annual impact reports. Annual impact reports are one of the very best ways that you can communicate to all of the people who have anything to do with you and the people who might want to have something to do with you in the future through applications, or even if you wanted to do a promoted post on social media where you do a paid ad, for example, make that your impact report. Do a paid ad for your impact report. Let people know if you support us, every dollar you send us is going to make a difference, and this is how. And you can show them in a beautiful impact report. If you don't know how to do impact reports, reach out to us. We want to help you with that. We also want to encourage your impact reports to not just be blocks of text. It shouldn't be an essay. It should be very visual. We're talking infographics. We want to see lots of beautiful designs, logos, colors, photos. They don't even have to be your own. They can be stock photos, but it should be something that is exciting to look at. It's not an essay to read. Great. Okay. We are breezing through these questions. We have just a few more left. If you have a question, I think you have the opportunity to drop it in the Q&A box for me, and I'm happy to add it to the collection of questions we have in front of us. All right. Next one. How do we measure long-term impact when our program outcomes may take years to fully materialize? That's a really good question. And one, like, don't feel disheartened. You're not alone. There are plenty of organizations that take years to materialize. I actually work with a nonprofit where they work on year-long commitments. And so it's not multiple years, but we can't know what's going on until the end of a complete year. Along the way, track the data. So stuff is happening every year or throughout the year. There is never a moment in time in which you cannot pull data. So pull data, but be consistent. So for example, if you're running a program, it's a longitudinal type of program, let's say it takes 3 years to complete, and you are wanting to see people at the beginning compared to how they are at the end, and you know that can take time. That's okay if you don't have the program outcome yet, but what you do have is my program's working with this many people who have these demographics. We're giving them this many hours of support. We are seeing that they've received X amount of dollars through wraparound services. We're providing them case management in these ways. Come up with every single thing you can quantify along the way, and then you can share anticipated outcomes. Based on successfully completing our program, they will have completed X amount of instruction hours, X amount of hands-on hours. They would have been around this many other people who were learning from these situations, whatever that looks like. As a result of that, we are expecting them to XYZ, lay it out for us. So it's okay if you haven't completed an entire rotation of your program yet. Just track everything along the way, and then let people know, if you're writing a grant, what you expect to have happen at the end of that rotation. So just make sure, again, you're celebrating those small successes. Don't wait 3 years to celebrate something. Let people know we've just completed another year. That means this many hours or this many connections, this many, whatever you're tracking. All right, next question. What are some common pitfalls to avoid when developing a logic model or theory of change for a program? This is a great question. So if you haven't heard these terms, logic model or theory of change, These are common requirements for grants, especially your community foundation grants. If you have a community foundation in the area that you live in, oftentimes they will require a logic model or theory of change within it. I've also seen it in several state and federal grants. So it's not something that's required across the board, but it's something that you'll start seeing the more you start writing grants. You'll be like, oh, there it is again. There's that logic model. Okay. One of the biggest pitfalls, though, is becoming too complex, or on the other side of the spectrum, overly simplistic. When we are looking at logic models and theories of change, these should be one-page documents, oftentimes with a visual. I usually see them with arrows going across the page. So like a rectangular box starting point, 3 arrows, and then another rectangular box for the end point. What we're looking to oftentimes see is program outcomes and program outputs. We want to see what are you putting into this program and what will that result in as an output. An output is the actions, the what you actually see from somebody. So an output might be that somebody has completed 24 hours of a training. An outcome would be that as a result of completing those hours of training, they were able to secure a job. So an outcome is the actual thing that they do. The output is why it's so important. And those are the two things you're going to see whether you're developing a logic model or a theory of change. You're going to see outcomes and outputs, and they're going to oftentimes tell you to include those. But what we don't want to see is getting overly complex. We don't want you to think this is a 20-page document and you have to go into every little detail of who does what and when it happens and all of the history of why it's important. We want it to be a one-pager that somebody can look at and make sense of. We also don't want it to be so simplistic that you don't seem to have anything unique about what you do, or it doesn't look like that what you're doing is any different than what they could get if they went to a free community class. What is what you are doing? How is it different? And how is it making a bigger and better impact? I want to make sure it's detailed enough to capture your program's essential components, but not so detailed that it gets too difficult and messy to understand. This can be really difficult when you are in the weeds. I have seen people who live and breathe their programming. So when they try to tell somebody else about it, it's so complicated. And we're like, hold on. One, you're using acronyms I've never heard of. Two, you're explaining in a way that assumes that I have the background and knowledge to know what you're talking about and what's required of people when we don't, especially if you're submitting it to a grant. So we want it to be something that's easy enough to understand, but not so easy you lose value or credibility. Another pitfall is when people don't align the model, we're talking about the logic model or the theory of change model, with your program's actual activities and goals. We want to make sure that everything in there is really what you do, not what you think you should do and you're not actually there yet, but it's actually what you do. Finally, we don't want people, whenever you're doing a logic model or theory of change, I think one of the biggest downfalls I see is people assume that change will occur simply because their activities are implemented. That's not the case, which is why it's so important that you have data proving that change can occur and does occur because of your specific activities. We also want to make sure you're realistic about timeframes and external factors. What things could possibly prevent your population from engaging in your program? We want to make sure that you're considering time frame. Is it reasonable that people probably could do something in a certain time, but is it likely that they would? Oftentimes people are going to need more time than we think they do. So making sure that we're cognizant of all of that when drafting your logic model or your theory for change. Okay, I know that one, I feel like that question was a little trickier than the other questions we had been talking about. One, because many of you might not have worked with logic models or theory of change documents before. So this could be brand new to you. If that's the case, remember that one, all of this has been done for you before. I want you to actually use the resources that one we have available for you, and that hopefully you'll be able to reach out to us if you need some consulting support. But this stuff it can be complicated, but don't make it too complicated for yourself. You got this. All of the nonprofits before you have done it. If they can do it, you can do it. Now let's look at number 8. How can we effectively communicate complex evaluation results to a non-expert audience, such as donors and community members? Such a great question. And this is what we kind of touched on earlier when you're talking about those impact reports. Now, we talk about communicating complex evaluation results. This is interesting because oftentimes nonprofits tend to not have complex data results if they don't have a data scientist on their team. Now, I do work with some medical nonprofits that are in like the health industries, and they're working with individuals with rare diseases, and they actually have chief science officers on their team, and they collect tremendous amounts of data, and it is very complicated, it is very complex, and it is information that we would never share with the general public because that's just too much information. It becomes information overload. People don't care. They don't want to know that level of detail. That is for internal use only. Now, what you should be sharing with the public are all of the big numbers we've talked about, helping so many people, the demographics of those people, what your help has turned into for them. How has working with your organization actualized into anything of significance for the people you support or the population you support? So think about, you've been on the receiving end of these impact reports, I'm sure, where you get a mailer or you get a flyer from an organization you've sent a donation to, and they say, thank you so much. Without you, we would have never been able to XYZ. Thank you so much. Because of you, this one person's life has been forever changed. So think back to those reports that you've received because you made one donation one time and you got a letter in the mail about it. And that's the type of impact you want to convey to other people. You want to convey the impact that inspires them to give again. You want to convey enough information to where you have compelled them to want to be a part of your mission. You don't want to convey too much information that they're like, that's just a lot of numbers. I don't care what that says. You want to give enough numbers, remember, for those intellectual types who love to see the data, but you also want to couple it with a beautiful, strong narrative of 1, 2, or 3 stories of people who have had a direct impact because of the work you do. Now, let me caution you on a few things that I sometimes see in impact reports. 1, this is not an opportunity for your staff to brag on themselves. So if you are the executive director and you've done amazing things, don't put that in your impact report. We don't want this to be a highlight of a person. We want this to really be focused on the impact for the community, not on how great your organization is. There is another time and place for that. Those celebrations should happen. If your organization has won awards, or if your executive director has won an award, if you're an executive director just completed a degree in something or a certificate in something, all of those are great. Don't put it in an impact report. When you are asking for money, keep it focused on the population, not on your people, your team, or your organization. It's always about those you serve. Another thing I would caution you on is make sure that you do not use people's real names, their real locations, or their real photos without their explicit permission in writing. I wouldn't even ask for a lot of their permission. I would use stock photos, give them a fake name, but you can still tell the story of somebody as long as others wouldn't read it and know immediately who you're talking about. So we're not using the names of their spouse, their children, their family, their pets. We're not talking about a very specific experience that they had that people in the community would recognize. It's okay when you write testimonials or narratives or stories about the population you serve. It's okay to switch out those key facts as long as you're not embellishing the outcome or you're not lying about the story itself. It's okay to sub things out because you're protecting the people you serve, but just don't sub things out and replace them with things that aren't true about the impact you had. So the ultimate goal here in these stories is to share the impact. And you can't lie about that, but it's okay for protection of others to switch out some things. The other thing I really want to caution you on, which I did talk about briefly earlier, is please avoid jargon and acronyms. So you know your world very well. You probably know all about people first language, you know about the legislation, you know about the things you should be doing in your world. Remember that the people who are on the receiving end of your grant applications or your donation solicitations, they don't know your world like you do. So if you really want to tug on their heartstrings and get them to support you, don't speak to them like a staff member. Speak to them like somebody who has never heard about what you do ever. And you want to avoid using the acronyms, and you want to avoid using anything that sounds too complex. You break it down in a very simple term. What is it that you do? We support individuals impacted by homelessness. How do you do it? We provide transitional shelter. How much does it cost to serve one person? Well, we know this and that. So here's where you have the opportunity to ask really those questions. Remember that we learned in elementary school, the who, what, where, when, why, and how. If you can put a short phrase next to each of those, that should really be the guiding document behind your impact report. It's not complicated. It's not too wordy. We want it to be concise in every single thing that goes out to the public. We want to be able, brevity is key. People lose interest and they're not reading every word anyway. Most people are skimming. So if they skim, what are they going to see that stands out to them that really compels them to contribute to the work that you're doing? Okay. I am taking a look. Oh, I see something in Q&A. Thanks so much. I see somebody had left a question. It says anonymous. Can we see the slides in real time? We only see speakers. So at the beginning of this, I had mentioned that we are doing it in a completely different format today. So rather than have a PowerPoint presentation and me kind of just talking through ideas, I actually had collected 8 questions before we started. And these are essentially FAQs that we could go through on program evaluation and impact that people would be able to turn around and immediately apply, because it's questions about how to do this work. So that was a little bit of a different format than we had than usual, but I hope you guys found it to be tremendously impactful as we're talking about evaluation and impact, because I want you to be able to take these questions. Hopefully there are questions you had as well, since we do consider them somewhat FAQs. We're hoping that these are things that were what you were wondering. If you have more questions that you're wondering, please drop them in the Q&A right now. I'll hang out for another minute or so. Or you can please complete that resource request form in the National Nonprofit Collaborative Library. We've got the little button there for you to complete a resource request form. You can put your questions in there. You can also email us. You have info@nationalnonprofitcollaborative.com as our email if you have any questions that we can help you out with, or if you do feel like it's time for a consultant and you're interested in exploring those options with us, we'd be happy to also connect you to that side of our world as well. We are so happy that you all spent part of your afternoon with us. I don't see any other questions coming through, and I don't want to hold anybody up. It's always a pleasure spending my afternoons with you guys. Keep an eye out for our next webinar next month. And in the meantime, keep making a big difference. You guys are doing such good work out there, and we're proud of you for it. So have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye.